Hey guys, back again with another Make.com, Airtable and Apify automation tutorial. Today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you how we can take a simple form like this that will take a search term, a city and a country. So we could have a search term like dentist, city Manchester, country UK. We can submit this form, and then we're going to be using Apify, Airtable, and Make.com to search Google, specifically search Google Maps, find all of the local companies. Then we're going to pull all of those companies into a database in Airtable, and then we're going to one by one automatically crawl each one of those websites that we have and actually find email addresses, phone numbers, the amount of reviews, street addresses, all that kind of good stuff, so that we can actually build a database of potential leads to outreach to and sell services to. As always, guys, if you do want the templates for the Make.com and Airtable database, all of the Make.com automations, of which there are going to be a few in today's video, do make sure that you look in the description below and you can find them in there. Click on the link, input your details, and I'll send them straight over to you after you've confirmed your subscription. Now, this could be used in a multitude of different ways, really. It kind of depends on what your business is, but building a database or a highly targeted database like this has a lot of value. For example, if you are a web design company, now that you have this information, you could also build a second automation, which is actually what we're going to be doing in another video. So in the second video of this series, which will be coming next week, we'll then build out the report generation, the sending, and then pulling any responses into a CRM, all built here within Airtable and completely automated just by putting in the terms into this form here, which is kind of crazy, right? So let's get stuck in. The tools that we're going to be using, as I mentioned, we're going to be using Airtable, we're going to be using Make.com, and I'll come on to that in a second. And we're also going to be using Apify to actually scrape Google and scrape Google Maps to pull the data from the search terms, and then also to crawl the websites that are found in the data to actually look for more contact information like email addresses and all that type of stuff that we can use in this second video. So the first thing we want to do, step one, as always, guys, we want to set up our Airtable database so that we can receive the data, right? So I'm going to come into my Airtable account. I'm going to click on Create. I'm going to click Start from Scratch. I'm going to call this, you can call this whatever you want, but for the sake of this, I'm going to call this Local Lead Generation Database, and then I'll just put our little YouTube tag on here. All right, so now we've named our database. Let's just get rid of this. I'm just going to change our main column to an ID. I'm going to make this auto number just so that we have an ID field there. Then I'm going to have this field as the search term. We'll make this single line text. These are all just going to be single line text. So I'm just going to delete these two columns here and we'll start a fresh. So then we'll go city. And then we're going to go country. And then we are going to have a field for status here as well. And this is going to be single select. And in here, we're going to have requested, processing, scraped. And then let's just delete these records that are empty. So this table here, this is going to be our data requests. So we're going to create that simple form that I showed you earlier on that populates this table here with the data requests, and then that's going to trigger the scraping of the Google Maps for the search term in this city and country. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is go to our Apify account. So now I'm going to go to apify.com. If you haven't got an account, sign up. You do get so Apify is a scraper, right? It's a web scraper. It has a bunch of different scraping tools, which are really, really awesome. I've been playing around with this a lot. If I go to the console here, if I log in, you can see if you go to the store, there is a bunch of different scrapers for a bunch of different things, all right? They're called actors, but essentially these are just like scraping bots. And they have different pricing structures depending on what you're using. I like to try and find the ones that are pay per usage. And that's what we are going to be using today. So the one that we're actually going to want to use is Google Maps Scraper. So if we click on Google Maps Scraper, do a search for that, we can see it here, Google Maps Scraper. It's compass/crawler Google Places. So I'm going to click on this. And then it's going to bring up the scraper, right, with some, these are all kind of like the settings that you can use for the scraper. So you can see here what it's looking for, or what it's expecting is an input, like a search term. Then it wants a location, so a city, and then also a country. And then you can see down here that you can set how many places to search for each visit. Now, just for this video, I'm just going to leave this at 50. Actually, I'm going to make it even less. I'm going to make this 25, just so that the speed of this video will be quicker, because it can take some time to do these scrapes. But you can have this up to, you know, as many as it can search. You can put the number as 9999999, and then it will just continue searching until it runs out of steam. So if I show you the previous runs that I've done here, if I just go down. Where is it? This one here, you can see, look, it ran. I aborted it because I would just, you know, I was testing some stuff. I wanted to see how far it could go. But this ended up bringing me 283 results, and that was for 57 cents. If you look down here at this one here, you got 50 results for 13 cents, and that took around about 4 minutes. So one of the things that you have to be aware of here is that these scrapes do take a little bit of time. But we'll cover that shortly. So let's go back to our actor. If you haven't run this before, which you won't have done if you're doing this from scratch, what I would do is just leave the restaurant search term in, leave the location search term in, click save and start, and just let that run for a couple of minutes. And the reason why you need to run it is because when we go to make.com shortly, if you haven't run this once before, it won't show up in your actor list when we're trying to automate things. So now that we've got that running, let's go back over to our Airtable database. And I'm going to create the form for this, right? So I'm going to come over to Forms. I'm going to click on New Form. I'm going to click on Create Form. Just going to leave this as New Data Request. You can add logos and cover images and stuff if you want to. I'm going to remove the status field here because we don't need that. And we're just going to publish this form for now. So now we have our form. We can input details here, and it's going to populate our Airtable database. If I go to edit, I'm just going to stay on this screen here because if I click on this, it's going to open up the settings. We are going to need to use the redirect to URL, so I'm going to turn that on, and we're going to show you why in a sec. So if now I go to make.com, if you don't have a make.com account, you will need to create one. I'm going to log in, and then I'm going to create a new scenario, and then I'm going to call this lead gen. I'm just going to call this YT. And we're going to say, we're going to call this automation initiate Google Scrape, Google Maps Scrape. I'm going to say 1 of 4. All right, so on our module here, our trigger, we're going to want to use Airtable, and then we're going to want to use watch responses. So you can see here, there's triggers when a new response to a form has been submitted. So I'm going to click on this one. Then we're going to create a hook. So we're going to call this new data request. I'm going to click on, actually I'm just going to add my little YouTube tag so I know that this is for the video. And then it's going to give us a webhook, right? So what we want to do is we want to copy this address to the clipboard. Now we want to come back over to our form, and we're going to want to put this in the URL field here. So if we click on the URL, this little pop-up is going to come up, and we're going to paste that in. And then really important, what we need to do is we need to add a tiny little bit of code on the end here. I'm going to do question mark record underscore ID, all lowercase. Again, it would help if I could spell today. Record underscore ID equals, and then you can see here, you've got this like record ID in curly brackets, right? So I'm going to add that in at the end. So essentially you need to add this on. So question mark record underscore ID equals record ID. And what that's going to do is every time that this form gets submitted, it's going to call the make.com webhook, but it's going to pass through the record ID of the new request here. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So I'm just going to save this. I'm going to publish this form. And then I'm going to come back over to make.com. I'm going to click run once. So now it's waiting for a form submission. Now we're going to come here and we're going to click dentist in Nottingham, UK. Click on submit. Now you can see the form's been submitted. Now it should redirect and we should get an accepted. There we go, we got it. So now if I come over here, you can see that it's received the response and it's given us a record ID in the output. And then we can click on add another module, Airtable, get a record. And now we're going to come into our database. So our local lead generation database, YouTube. We're going to click on the table data requests. And now we're going to get the record that was just submitted via the form. And if I click on OK, run this module, I'm just going to grab this record ID that we just got here so I can test this. Click on OK. And now you can see, right, we've got our search term is dentist, our city is Nottingham, our country is UK, right? So it's grabbed that, that data from the database. So if I just go back a little bit now, I'm going to come into our data. You can see we now have our new request. Now we do want to update the status here once the form is submitted as well. So I'm going to go to automation. I'm just going to click here when a form is submitted. Now it's going to ask me for which form. So I'm going to click on table data requests. I'm going to select our new data requests form. So when that form is submitted, I'm now going to click on add advanced logic or action. I'm going to update record. And then we're going to use our same table, data requests. The record ID here, if I click on this little plus, I'm going to use the insert value from field Airtable record ID. And then the field here, I'm just going to use the status to requested, right? And that's it. All we need to do is turn that on. I'm just going to rename this. Update status. So now once the form gets submitted, it will update this status to requested. All right. So it will look like that. If I come back over to our Apify, you can see it's finished scraping the results here. So we've got 25 results. You can see all of those down here. So it's grabbed those restaurants from New York. And we've now got some data to work with. And what that means is, if we now come back over to our make.com scenario, click on add another module, we're going to go to Apify, and we're going to say run an actor. And then because we've run this now, in the actors here, we will be able to use it, right? So compass / crawler - Google - places. Now, where the magic happens is this input JSON field. So what we need to do is we need to come back over to our Google Maps scraper. I'm going to click on Google Maps scraper to come back to the inputs, right? Now this is where you need to, well, what I would advise that you do is have this set to whatever you want. For this video, I'm just going to use the number of places to 25. But like I say, if you want to get lots of data, you can bump this up. And as I showed you before, you know, I was scraping this for a good while and it was, you know, I got like 280 results and it could keep going. So like you judge what you need based on each one of these searches, but bear in mind that it does cost. And as you can see in the bottom left here, you get a certain amount of free usage per month. So you get up to $5 of free usage per month. I'm coming up to the edge of that now because I've been testing a lot. And if I go back to the runs, you can see down here that one that we literally just did now, that costs 6 cents. So you can get a lot of data for pretty cheap. There's other places that are cheaper online. I don't know, but yeah, I think this is pretty good. But you need to judge this for your own scenario. So if I just go back. Right, so now what we need to do is we need to click on JSON here. And then essentially what this is doing is it's taking all of this stuff that is in these options, and there's a bunch of other stuff that you can play around with. Like you could even extract the reviews. You can do this deeper city scrape, which I actually like to turn on. There's a bunch of stuff. You can have a look at all these different options. But when we click over to JSON, it's basically codifying all of those manual options. So now we just want to grab this JSON. I'm just going to copy it. Come back over to our make.com scenario. I'm just going to paste it in here. Now we've got 3 different variables to use, right? We've got our search term. If I come back over to our database, we've got our search term, we've got the city, and we've got the country. So we want to be able to plug these in to this JSON code here. And this is really simple because you can see down here that we've got New York, USA. So all that we're going to do is we're going to highlight New York. I'm going to delete that. And then I'm going to here put our city in, and then USA, I'm going to highlight that, I'm going to delete it. I'm going to put our country in. And then if I come down here, you can see search strings array. So I'm going to highlight the restaurant input that was in there. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to put our search term in. And you can see down here also, you've got the max crawled pages. I've left that at 25. If you wanted to change that, you could do here as well. So I'm just going to click OK. Now we have the beginnings of our automation setup, right? So now if we were to turn this on, every time that form was submitted, this is going to get, like this data request is going to get logged, and then it's going to get the record, and then it's going to send that request over to the actor, and this scrape is then going to start. So the last thing that we want to do here in this first scenario, which is a short one, is we're just going to click on plus, and we're just going to update our status of our record. And we're just going to change it from requested to processing, right? So now we're just going to select our base. We're going to go to table data requests. We're going to grab the record ID from earlier. And then all that we're going to do is come down here to status, turn the map off, click the drop down, and we're just going to move this to processing. Click on OK. So now that's our first scenarios done. So I'm just going to click on this. I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to back out, right? So now this is our workflow. I'm going to come back into scenarios. I'm going to create a second scenario. So we're going to call this local lead gen YT. And then this second scenario is going to be called add data to Airtable. So this is going to be 2 of 4. So let's just quickly save that. So what we did in our previous scenario is we triggered a scrape. And when we do that, this scraper is going to be running in the background. And depending on how many you've set for your max search result, 25 isn't going to take a long time. But if you set it at hundreds, then it will take a while, right? It might take 10, 15, 20 minutes. It really depends on how many you're looking for. So what we want to do is we want to have this next scenario trigger when the web crawl is finished. And we don't know how long that's going to be. So previously I was playing around with this, and you can add like a bunch of sleep modules between the run actor and the get the data from the actor. But again, you don't really know exactly how long it's going to be. It's better to split these out into 2 scenarios so that you can just trigger this next scenario once the scrape is finished. So you can see down here, if we click on the module, we click on Apify, and we can watch for actor runs. So this triggers whenever a selected actor is finished, essentially. So if we click on this, we're going to click on create a webhook, and we're going to say new data request finished. And we're going to click on the actor, and it's the same one that we used before. So Compass, Crawler, Google Places. Click on save. So this is now going to trigger once that's finished. I'm going to click on OK. And then the next thing that we need to do is add another Apify scenario, and we need to use get dataset items. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to pull the results of the finished scrape. So if you see down here, we got dataset ID. Just going to click on this. And then in our trigger module, if you scroll down, you'll see there is one down here called default dataset ID. Just going to click on that and drop that in. And then again, by the way, here you can set this limit. So if you've set your scraper to run for like 500 requests or however many it might be, you need to change this limit, because if you leave it at the default of 100 and you've done like 500 scrapes, then you're only going to get 100 in this data set. So you need to make adjustments to this limit based on your own scenario. So I'm going to click on OK. So now that we've got the start of our next scenario, which allows us to grab the data, we need to be able to put it back into Airtable, right? And have a bunch of records in Airtable. So let's come back over to our Airtable database. I'm going to click on Add, Start from Scratch. And then we're going to fill this in with lead data. We're going to call this table lead data. And we've got a bunch of fields to add in here because it does actually pull quite a bit. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to want to use is like the unique identifier is the URL. So I'm going to put URL as the name here. I'm going to set this as a URL field. And then I'm going to change this next field. I'm going to call this company. This is going to be the company name. I'm just going to delete this one and delete this one for now. Let's start again. So now I'm going to have an email, which we won't get out of our initial scrape, but we'll come on to that separately. I'm going to put phone. I'm going to create a field for the street. So we'll start with the address here, right? So we got street, city, postcode, or zip code if you're in America. Then we're going to have country. And you don't have to collect all this information if you don't want to, guys, but I feel like it's useful, so here we will. And then one thing that we're going to do is we're going to add an extra field to link this back to the data request that this lead was generated from, right? So I'm going to click on create. Just to quickly recap that, I'm going to click on plus. I'm going to click on link to another record. I'm going to click on data requests. And then I'm going to call this, I'm just going to click create field. And we don't need any of these lookup fields here, so I'm just going to skip this for now. And then that's going to allow us to link back to our data requests. So if I click on data requests, you can see there's another column here, another field here that's been added so that we can see the link between the two. I'm actually going to hide that because we don't need that on the data request, but there is one extra field that we forgot to add in actually that we do need. So I'm going to click on here and we're going to call this dataset ID. Actually, sorry, I'm going to call this run ID. So this is the scraping run ID. I'm going to click on create field. And then I'm going to come back to our make scenario. I'm just going to quickly save this one and go back to number 1. So if I come back to scenarios, I'm going to come back into our initial scenario. I'm going to come into this update record. And what we want to do is we just want to also pass through the run ID, which is just this ID here from run and actor. So I'm just going to pop that in. And the reason that we want to do that is because it allows us to link the records in the next scenario. So I'm just going to save that. And then we can go back to our Airtable database. So that's all the fields that we need. This is all the data that we're looking for from the scraper. All right. So let's go back to our first scenario, and we're going to do a test run. All right. So I'm going to click on run once. So you can see now it's waiting for a response. If I come over to our Airtable, I'm going to click on forms. I'm going to click on done, which gives us the form. Then we're going to click on dentists. In, let's say, Leeds in the UK. Click on submit. The form submitted successfully. We should get an accepted, which we do. Now you can see that this is running, right? So it's the data's come through. We've received the data and we've pulled it from the database, and then we've sent it through to the actor, and now we've updated our record to processing. So if I go back to the database here, to data requests, you can see our dentists and leads is processing, and this is the run ID that we've grabbed as well. If I come over to our Apify account, and if I click on runs here, you can see that the scraper is in action. So it is now running. It's been going for a minute already. If I come back over to our second scenario that we just set up a minute ago, where we're watching for the actor runs and then getting the dataset items, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on run once so that this waits for that actor to finish. And then once it finishes, it's going to give us the list of items, and then we can work with that for the second step here. So I'll just skip forward a little bit for once this is finished, guys. All right, so now this is run, and if we click on our get dataset items, you can see down here that we've got a bunch of bundles. I'm just gonna shrink some of these, and you can see we've got 25 outcomes because that's what we were working with, right? So if I click in one of these, you can see you've got the search string, the rank. There's a bunch of different stuff that you get in here, which is pretty cool. Now we want to add that to our Airtable database. So I'm going to click here, add a new module, click on Airtable. I'm going to create a record. And we're going to go into our database. We're going to click on our lead data. Then we're going to start plugging things in. So we've got URL. And not every record that it pulls is going to have a URL, unfortunately. But you can see this first one does. It's website here. So we're going to drop website in. We've got company, which is usually the title. So we're going to put title in there. Email, it's not going to have, right? Phone, we're going to want to put phone unformatted into there. Street, we've got, street we have here. Then we've got city. Then we've got postcode. And then we've got country. If you're in the US as well, you might want to add state. But yeah, that now gives us all of our basic data that we've pulled from Google Maps. And we do also want to link the data request in here as well. But we can't do that because we don't have the record ID just yet. So first off, I'm just going to click on OK, just to save this in, because that will create the basics of the record for us. But I'm just going to come back over here. I'm going to right click in between these two. I'm going to click on add a module. I'm going to click on Airtable, and we're going to search for a record. So we're going to search for our existing data request that this scrape came from. So I'm going to open up our database. I'm going to go to our data requests table. So we essentially need to search for the record that has the run ID, right? So if we come over here, I'm just going to click on data requests again. So this field is called run ID, and then it has that ID in it. So back here, I'm going to put curly bracket, run ID, so it needs to match exactly the column name, equals quotation marks, and then we're going to click this run ID here. So you can see that we've got this ID, it actually matches this ID, and that's because this request started the run, and then obviously when the run was finished, we're just going to pull this and we're going to do a search for it. So if I just run this module, I'm going to just grab that ID, click on OK, and you can see now it's found the original, the data request. Then what we want to do is update the processing status of the data request. So I'm going to right click in here, add another module. I'm going to click on update record. We're going to go into our database. We're going to click on data requests. We're going to grab that record ID that we just searched for. So I'm going to click on ID here. And then I'm going to update the status, go turn the map off, and then mark that as scraped. and then click on OK. Now the reason that I'm putting these two nodes here instead of after this Apify one here is because there's going to be a lot of different bundles that come out of this data set. As you saw before, there was 25 separate bundles. And what that means is because there is each one of those bundles is going to run this every time for each bundle. So we had 25 bundles before. That means it's going to run this 25 times and create a record for each of them. If we were to drop these two after this, it's essentially going to run these two searches 25 times or 100 times, however many you've got of the records to be created. But we only need to do it once. We don't need to update the record hundreds of times. We just need to do it once. So we're putting that here just to save on our own make.com costs and make sure that we're not unnecessarily running these two modules. That's why they need to sit here before the record creation here. Hope that makes sense. So now that's the second part of our scenario done, right? So we've got the initial scenario that takes the form fill, it starts the scrape. Then once the scrape is done, this scenario then updates the data request to say that it's finished scraping, and then it adds all of the individual leads into our lead data table here. So let's just test this, right? Okay, so now that we want to test this, we actually need to turn this on, right? So I'm going to turn this one on. Make sure you save everything first, guys. So save what you have done. Make sure that you don't lose any. I've done it too many times with make.com. Make sure you don't lose any progress. We're going to come back out, and then we're going to also turn on our Google Maps scrape. We're going to turn this one on. We're going to test these two things together, right? So I'm going to come back over to our database. I'm just going to delete these two. Get rid of those test submissions before. I'm going to come over to our form. I'm going to click search terms. I'm going to go dentist in, let's say, Wakefield, UK. Click on submit. Now when we hit here, before you go anywhere else, you do need to wait for this to redirect and get this accepted. So that can take just a few seconds there. Now you can see that our first lot has run. If we come over to our runs, it's created the crawl. So now our Google Map scraper is crawled. And then if we come back over to our second scenario here that we switched on, once the crawl is done, we should see the results here start to populate. So I'll just wait until the run is finished. But if we just look at our Airtable database here, we can see that in our data requests, our dentist Wakefield UK is processing with the run ID here. We have no lead data just yet. Yeah, let's see how this pans out. Okay, so we have run into an error here, guys. So let's have a quick look. Value is not a valid record ID. So if we click on create record, it's because we forgot to, after we searched our record ID here, we forgot to add it in here. So if we come over into our data requests to link it to our data request, I'm just going to click on search records. I'm going to click on ID, click OK. Just click run once quickly, and then we can use the existing data and it will just run through that again for us. So now you can see it's adding all of the data into Airtable. If we come back over to Airtable here, look, you can see it's all being added in. So we should have 25 new records. Awesome. But you see we don't have any emails here, which is the next step that we need to figure out because we need to be able to contact these people. But awesome, right? That's working for us. So we got step 1 and step 2 done. The next step is really, really easy because we're going to go back over to Apify. We're going to go to actors. You're going to go to store and you're going to want to search for this one here. It says Google Maps email extractor. So if you come over to the store, Google Maps email, you can see it here, Google Maps email extractor. Now this works in conjunction with the Google Maps scraper that we are already using. And if you look down here, what it wants is the data set ID from the finished scrape that we just performed. So this one's really easy to do. If I just grab the data set ID, if I come back over here, I'm going to click on our data set items. I'm going to pull this data set ID here. Click on copy, And I'm just going to paste that in here. Remember, we need to run this in Apify first so that it shows up in our make.com account. So I'm just going to click on save and start. Now that's going to start using Google Maps Extractor to crawl the websites that were found on the Google Maps Extractor, or the scraper, should I say, and then it's going to try and find the emails for those records. This one takes a little bit of time to run as well, so I'll check back in once it's finished. All right, guys, so this is finished now, and you can see that we've now got a bunch of data in the output. Let's have a look and see if I just click on preview in tab. So what it did is it took all of the websites, and then it tried to figure out, hey, is there any email addresses anywhere? As you can see, on some of them there is, on some of them there isn't, some of them there's multiple. So it definitely is going to scrape through multiple pages of the website, and it's going to see what it can find. So now what we want to do is we want to actually pull the those emails back into our lead generation database and add them into the email field, right? So we're just going to come back to our make.com scenario, and we're going to trigger the scrape from our second run here. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to click on add a router. Then I'm going to click on plus. And then I'm going to click on this one here, and I'm just going to click on Apify, run an actor. And then if we come back over to our Google Maps Extractor, let's have a quick look what that's called. It's called Google Maps with contact details here. You can see that. So I'm going to come back over to make.com, click on Apify, Google Maps with contact details. Then we need to input the JSON to make sure that this triggers, okay? So we come back over here, click on the JSON, really small piece of JSON code. We're going to copy that. I'm going to drop that in here. And you can see that the dataset ID is already populated. So we're just going to pull that out like we did previously. We're going to delete it. And then between these two quotation marks, we are going to use the dataset ID from our watch actor runs that was at the beginning of this, this specific scenario. So if we click on default dataset ID here, it's going to add that in. And then we're going to click on OK. So one thing that we want to do is change the order of these. We want to run the actor first, and then we want it to create all of the Airtable records second. So if I right click on this, I'm going to click on order routes, and then I'm going to grab this one, and I'm going to move this here, click on apply. So now you can see we've got the first path is running the actor, and then the second it's going to keep looping around to create all of these records. So let's move those in, auto align it. So now we have our scrape that runs, and then it triggers the next scrape, which is for the email finding, and then it's going to add the rest. While it's running that scrape, it's going to add the Airtable records that we saw before. If I click back over, we've got them all there, right? So I'm going to click on save, and then I'm just going to set up our final scenario here. Now, because we have this actor running, what we want to do is once it's finished, we want to be able to update the Airtable records with the email address. So if we come out of here, we're going to create a new scenario. I'm going to label it YT. This is going to be 3 of 3. So I thought we were going to need 4, but we actually only need 3 because we just combined one of them into the second one. So now we're just going to update emails. So now I'm going to click on plus. I'm going to click on Apify, and we're going to watch for the actor run. And we're watching for the finished run of the email extractor. So click on actor, and you're looking for this one here, Google Maps with contact details. Click save. It's going to create this trigger. Now we're going to click on OK. So once this finishes, what we're going to want to do is click on Apify. We're going to want to get the dataset items. Click on dataset ID, scroll right down, grab the default dataset ID, click on OK. And again, remember guys, you've got your limit here. So if you are doing hundreds or thousands, then you need to up the limit so that you can actually pull more data. So to finish building this automation out, we really need some data to work with here. So I'm just going to come back over to our run, and we need this data set here. So we need to grab the data set ID. So to get the data set ID, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on preview in new tab. It's going to open the data set. I was just showing you this a second ago. I'm just going to grab, you can see the ID here, right? So just after the data sets, I'm just going to grab this. From that U to P, I'm going to copy it, and then I'm just going to right click on here, run this module only, drop that data set ID in. It's going to pull that for us, and now we have that data set to work with that we've just found. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is search for the records here that we previously scraped via their website, because the thing that we have in common with this email scrape is the website. So we got the website in here. So that means we can search our lead database and then update their email if there is one. But we only want to do that if there is an email, right? So I'm going to add a new module. I'm going to click on Airtable. I'm going to click on search records. I'm going to select our base. Then we're going to select our table for lead data. And then we're going to do a search formula where our URL, so curly brackets URL, which is this field here, equals, then we're going to find website in here. So I'm just going to do a quick search for it. Yeah, website from get dataset items. I'm going to drop that in. And then we're going to click on OK. But we only want to search for the website if there was an email address found in the bundle. So between this, I'm going to set up a quick filter where I'm going to call it has email, where the condition is set to contact details. Where is that in here? So yeah, contact details at the bottom. You want to click this little arrow to open up emails. 1. And then you're going to want to set that to exists, because if 1 doesn't exist, then we don't want to continue with this search. So I'm going to click on OK. Now we want to be able to search this record. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm just going to grab that there. I'm going to click run this module, click website, OK. Now you can see that we've got a record to work with. And then once we've got the record, we're going to want to update it with the new email, right? So update record. Click on base. Let's go into our database. I'm going to click on lead data. The record is going to be the one that we just searched for and matched with the email, with the URL. And then the email here is going to be the contact details, emails, number 1. All right, and I'm going to click on OK. So now, once the email scraper is done, we're going to pull all of the data. We're going to find the ones that have an email. Then we're going to search for the record in our database, and then we're going to update the email. Hope that makes sense, guys. So I'm just going to save this one. And then all that would be left to do now is turn this on. If we come back out, we now have our three automations, right? So we've got our first one. Let's just quickly go over them. We're looking for a form response. So we're going to use the form to submit a data request. All right. That's going to trigger this response. We're going to get that information. We're going to pass it to the Google Maps scraper to start running that scrape. And then we're going to update the record to processing. Then in our second scenario here, we're going to watch for the scraper to be completed. We're going to search for the existing data request. We're going to update the data request just to say that it's finished processing and it's now scraped. Then we're going to start the email scraper with the data set out of this initial scrape. And then we're going to add all of the data records to Airtable here one by one and load them all in. So they come in like this. In our third one, once the email scraper is finished, we're going to grab the data set, and then if there is an email, we're going to find the record and we're going to update the record. And there we go, guys. This one takes a little while to set up because you've got to do some runs. So I recommend when you're doing runs to work with Apify that you make the run amount small so that you don't burn through cost, because it does obviously cost credits, and B, you can just finish the runs quicker so that you can test things out, right? Again, guys, as always, in the description below, you can download the blueprints for make.com and also the Airtable database. In the next video, we're going to use AI to crawl some of the websites, pull all the information that is currently on these websites, and we're going to pull together a report, and we're going to automate the sending of that report to these potential clients. Obviously, you can use this data however you want. That's why I wanted to split this out into 2 videos, because you might not want to do website reports and send all that stuff out, but you might want to just start building a database of potential leads that you can have a sales team contact, or do whatever you need to with. That also includes email addresses, phone numbers, all that kind of good stuff. So that's what this video is. And then in the next one, we're going to jump into AI and how we can start outbounding some of these people. So I hope you enjoyed it. I know this one was a little bit more complex, using scrapers and all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, let me know in the comments below how you found it. If you're using it for anything specific, let me know. If you got any questions, let me know. And yeah, I will see you next week in the next video.